Hi and welcome, I'm Anisha Nandi and right now I'm sitting down with Kim Gamel. She was most recently the AP's Middle East Regional News Editor and right now she's a Knight Wallace Fellow right here on U of M's campus. Kim, thank you so much for sitting down with us today.
It's nice to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about your journey to finding journalism as a profession and how your passion led you there?
Well, it started when I was a senior in college actually, and I had the opportunity to participate in a program that sent me to what was still the Soviet Union. I was an exchange student my senior year in college, and that was a really exciting year for me. And I decided that I really liked traveling, I really liked learning about new cultures. I actually spent the next year after graduating as a nanny for a couple at the U.S. Embassy in Moscow.
Oh.
And that sort of turned me off to the Foreign Service. It was a really great experience, but I decided I definitely was more interested in journalism, having more control over the storytelling. And so I got a job for an English language newspaper. And after my contract as a nanny ended, I worked for them for about a year and a half. I didn't even know what a lead was at the time, but they took me on. And I realized I had a lot to learn, so I applied to Medill School of Journalism. And I went there for just a year to get my master's degree.
And from there, you got involved in more international reporting, is that right?
That's right. I spent some time reporting in the U.S., paying my dues, as they say. And I spent time I did jobs in Iowa, North Carolina, and New York. And then I was posted to Stockholm, Sweden, where I was the news editor for 3 years. And that was really great. It's a beautiful place to live, just beautiful. And I handled the Nobel Prizes every year, which was really exciting. However, I was in Stockholm when 9/11 happened, and everything shifted for everybody at that time, and my interest zoomed into the Middle East. And so I ended up going back to the U.S. to work on the AP's war desk in the run-up to the Iraq War, and then I gained a lot of expertise doing that. So I eventually was posted to Baghdad in 2006. So I was in Iraq 2006 to 2009.
Okay.
And then I was based in New Delhi for a little while.
Okay.
And then I was based in Cairo. And I was in Cairo actually from basically 2010 until I came here.
Okay.
So until August. So I was in the Middle East for much of the past decade. We would go out with heavy security, and we often went out with the U.S. military on embeds. So it was a real challenge, and I learned so much about, first of all, you had to be very resourceful to get information, because you couldn't just, call somebody on the phone and get them to answer a question.
Absolutely. So could you go in depth a little bit more about a specific situation or a specific article where you had to employ those skills and really extract that information in a unique, resourceful way?
Sure. I did a story about Iraqi widows. The death toll was just so high. I think in, one of the years, 36,000 people were reported as killed based on the UN figures, and that was just in 1 year. Mostly they were men fighting, and or just dying in bombings. And there were a lot of Iraqi women that were left without their husbands. And of course, it's a very conservative Muslim society, and the tradition for Iraqi widows is for the husband's family to take them in. And however, there were so many of them that the traditional system was falling apart.
So how did you find yourself building those kind of relationships where they would feel closer to you or feel like they could trust you more?
I think it's just talking to them and letting them give their side of the story, not showing any judgment. That includes not just in the things you say, but in the questions that you ask. There's a way to ask questions. For example, once I was interviewing a couple insurgents who were coming back and turning over their weapons in order to participate in a reconciliation program. And, these were hardcore guys, and I can only imagine their views about women because they obviously hold a very conservative view of Islam.
Right.
And however, they were joking with me, they were talking to me. One of them called me sister, which the Afghan reporter who was with me told me he was very relieved to hear, because it meant they weren't radioing ahead to schedule an attack on us.
Oh, wow.
So that was really interesting, but it was definitely a challenge. So after, nearly a decade in the Middle East and a particularly hard past few months, I had done an assignment. I spent a few months in Afghanistan, and it was a particularly difficult time there due to attacks on reporters and other people. So I decided it was time for a break. And I applied for the Knight Wallace Fellowship, because the Knight Wallace Fellowship gives you a lot of freedom to explore, and the focus of the fellowship is really on professional and personal development, which is something I wanted to look at, because I feel like I'm, the definition of a mid-career journalist. I'm really at a spot right now where I've done a lot of the things that I wanted to do. I've been a war correspondent. I've been a foreign correspondent. I've always focused on print, and I recognized that the future really holds the most for reporters who adapt and who have the ability to do it all. Even if you don't have to do it all, you have to understand how to do it all. Video, social media, photos. As far as my role in that, I'm not sure. The fellowship is nearing an end, so I'm actually just starting to think about what's next. But I definitely think that I will go back to being a print reporter, but I will participate in more multimedia projects and make sure that, my stories always, or at least as often as possible, have a multimedia aspect to them.
Definitely.
I think that's really important.